Mediopolis, Chapter 15 continued. The mother was still doing the show tour with young Lucy, who was still with her, and she'd explained that young Kit was also known, an earlier age, as Stu short for Stuart, and that since young Kitterina had showed up also, and they'd adopted her more recently, that Stu was now also known more as Stu the student, because he wasn't the only Kit now in the house, so he was Kit Stew, rather than just Kit only, to distinguish between the two Kits, to avoid confusion, the mother had said. Young Kit Stew was always known as a student since a young age. She'd noticed his studying ways, since leaving a lot of accurate pictures lying around the house, very accurate portrayals of different members of the house at that time. He had these friends that he used to play animal games with when he was younger, explained the mother, now wandering off along the corridor with Lucy in tow. Stu was out a lot of the time meeting them. That's where he would go out to meet them. They gave themselves recent animal nicknames, she confided in Lucy, at the old farm show where he'd gone for the show studies last year. They were farm show studies that he'd met different friends on. He and his friends had given themselves animal nicknames, but only they called themselves that, really, when they were around each other. She just called him Kit Stew, as the rest of the family still did. And she hoped it was all in jest, just a little fun, perhaps. Until she discovered, some time ago, she was explaining now to Lucy as they were strolling along the long corridor, she discovered this was some kind of animal theocracy or animal religion that they gotten into. Still, they weren't that serious into it yet. There had been no animal gods and no animal demons or no animal angels, nothing of that sort, the mother had explained. There were no animal priests or vicars or imams or rabbis, nothing of that nature either, the mother had said. It was more of an animal psychology and an animal theology that seemed to attach to it. She was struggling to understand quite what it was, because they weren't that serious into it, but they'd only gotten so far. Yet they followed it along with the devotion of some sort of believer that was growing in their faith, or their belief in whatever it was, the mother had said. Well, what do they actually believe in then? Asked Lucy, feeling that the room had looked a little animalistic, like an animal lived there, though she'd not wanted to say that to the mother, of course, out of politeness. And young Stu, well, somehow, with all the food scattered around and all the clothes thrown around, yes, it did seem a bit haphazard and animal-like, but, well, they seemed to believe in having animal energies or something of that sort. There were these different animal skills, animal gifts they call them, that they have to acquire by following the animal training, and there were, these different kind of things. Something that's similar to an animal, and the mother said, as if trying to rack her brain, looking like she was a little flummoxed by trying to explain what it was about. I don't know. They say that there are these animal virtues and animal vices that some people are drawn to, and they try to give you these animal readings. What their goal is right now, it seems to be constructing totem poles. That's been their more recent animal project, as far as I can understand it, explained the mother, going on to say that the totem was constructing a combination of different animals that represented their different animal energies. Apparently, they've been diagnosed as having those different animal energies or animal abilities by some sort of animal doctor, so-called animal doctor, the mother had said, rolling her eyebrows once more. I didn't see any totems in there, in the room, said Lucy. No, they have so many of them, but they're so large they're constructing them outside. I think it's in a field. They go there for the visit. Oh, it's one of the animal shows that they go to. They couldn't do them in the room because of the size of them. They're learning to sculpt with them too. So I suppose at least it has some practical purpose, she said, now looking around as if deciding what door to go to next. They just have pictures in the room. I don't know where they put them now, but they're drawing different pictures of them. I guess they're planning to sort of draw the right thing before they do the full construction, I guess, said the mother. They're not in 3 dimensions yet. I think it's just a youthful imagination. Well, I hope it is, said the mother. I hope they just grow out of it eventually, and it's just a bit of fun for them, nothing too serious, she said, trailing off, as if not sure. I suppose it could be too much of a distraction from the studies, that's what worries me, she added. Although, as one of the animal preachers, if you can call it that, snarled back at me, we're all studying animals, laughed the mother. So I suppose it is a part of their biological studies that Kit's doing, or Kit's student is. He's studying biology, psychology, theology, and sociology. They have to do 5 studies. Well, as a minimum, he's meant to do 7 or 8, but he dropped a couple. He might take a couple back up, but, well, you can ask him all about those things if you want to, trailed off the mother, going on again. Well, it's true, animals do spend an awfully long time studying their mates as well, and their prey, and their whole habitat as well, went on the mother. So perhaps we can learn from the animal teachers, if they do spend so long studying themselves. Then perhaps there is some benefit in it after all, she said, thoughtfully, almost trying to question and answer herself, unsure about it all. But I hope they're not too much of a distraction from all the human teachers, the human studies they've got to do. I should be grateful they're not into any of the other religions, perhaps, the human religions, or the other ones, those you don't know that much about, said the mother, looking over to Lucy, rambling on, further up the corridor now, going past long rows of locked and closed doors. Lucy wondered who on earth might live in any of those that hadn't been introduced to her. Well, what other religions are there, except for human ones? Said Lucy. Surely they're all man-made anyway, aren't they? Asked Lucy, now stopping to look out at a window in a gap between the long rows of doors, admiring down below and beyond large fruit trees that were gathered below, and long rows of rooftops that she noticed beyond them. There were also lots of vegetable patches. She noticed them in the gardens, surveying them down below. Well, I don't know much about it all, really, said the mother. I only see the religion shows sometimes. I don't do any religious shows myself, though. Some of the visitors have, and I've taken an interest when they've done their religious shows. Watched some of it with them, or listened to some of the religious songs and the religious dances. I was interested in those especially, commented the mother. But I'm not into religious shows myself, she commented. How or where or why these religions come from, I really don't know. You'll have to discuss it with one of the older mans. He does theological studies. Old Theo. He's one of the visitors. She pointed down the corridor, back to where they just come from, to one of the closed doors, one that she just mentioned briefly on passing. You'd have to ask old Theo. He does studies and that sort of thing. I don't know anything about it. Where they all come from. Some people believe they're inspired by God, angels, or demons, or otherworldly things. He believes in ghost religions, zombie religions. Old Theo, well, he studies those. That's what he claims anyway. I can't really make any head or sense out of it all, really, said the mother, shaking her head, as if she felt it was all beyond her. I can only take too much of his discussions, really. Well, he thinks all manner of weird things. Oh, the alien religions. I forgot them too. He says he's studying those as well, said the weary mother. What's that meant to be? Asked Lucy. What's alien religion? As if all the other things had made sense. Oh, the robot religions. Well, I forgot those. Oh, I don't know, some automatic religions where you have to do the sermons that are programmed in or something. Everybody's programmed to say, pray, sing, and pray at the right times. Something like that. I don't know, really, said the mother, shaking her head again. Oh, well, it's just, you can ask him more about it. It's not something I know much about. I'm sorry my son got into one of the animal religions, but I'm glad he's not in any of the others, the ones that Theo goes on about. A zombie religion, or ghost religions, alien religions. I wouldn't want him getting into any of that, you know, complained the mother, shaking her head, as if the mere mention of all those things was just too much for her to even contemplate. And then there were the religion of the trees, and the religions of the mountains. That's what old Theo goes on about. He says people base their religions around all sorts of different things. Oh, the religions of the stars. I forgot those too. I don't know. Who's to say where any of it comes from, though? Said the mother, now shrugging her shoulders, as if giving up on the whole thing. I just think it's too much, really, to think about it all. But I do try sometimes, but I just don't know myself, she said, shaking her hand. She looked back to the elder son's room. I suppose I'm glad it's only an animal religion that he's getting into, well, compared to some of the other things, But I still worry for him. I try and find out as much as I can. It doesn't sound too bad, the totems that he's creating and, all the animal energies. Well, it doesn't sound too bad that what I know of it, said the mother. I suppose he's still young and curious, just experimenting at that age, learning what it's all about. It does get him out, and they do a lot of exercises with it also, she said, trying to consider the positives of it. But it does get a little out of hand sometimes. But you won't have to worry about that. They do look after themselves relatively well. If they upset their room, that's their problem, she said. Now turning away from the elder son's room, young Kit student, who she felt she'd gone on long enough about now, especially since young Lucy, the potential childminder, wouldn't have to look after him anyway, wouldn't be responsible for him or the other elder children. And then she went on about the older man too, noticing that she'd mentioned him, but wanted to conclude her thoughts on him. Old Theo, the writer that had been staying there, one of the older men she'd invited to visit that needed to stay for a while. It's been useful having him. It's been useful having him here for some of the other students, for my elder student, so that they can talk together. Well, with the subjects that are relevant to them both, It's been useful having the theologian staying, older Theo, just because Theo really doesn't push his belief onto other people. He doesn't push his belief onto Kit Stew, not at all. He just discusses it with him. He doesn't try to prescribe, just describes what he knows, that's all. So he doesn't push anything. I think he just tries to describe as much as he can, not prescribe, said the mother. Perhaps he knows how to talk to him well, and eventually he might prescribe something, but I don't think he ever has yet. I'm glad he hasn't, because he didn't really get to know him that well. He was just there as an information source, I think. I think Kit Stew just goes to him for questions when he wants to know more, because they've got a lot of interests. The interest in common are the theologies, but, well, young Kit Stew, he's studying sociology, then there's psychology, and then there's all the animology as well. There are a lot of subjects he's studying, but he only goes to Theo when he's got some specific questions about theology. You could go to him too, if you had any questions, said the mother as an afterthought, looking back to the older man's room. You don't follow a religion or theology yourself, though? Asked Lucy, now turning to the mother herself, feeling that she already knew about some of the others more than the mother herself. Well, as I said, I take an interest in some of the religious shows. Um, no, I don't really. I don't have any strong beliefs. Well, I believe the angels, and God, if there is, are watching us all the time. They're the only ones that watch all of our show, even though we all get to watch each other sometimes, said the mother, by way of her own explanation. Well, I don't mind watching some of the visitors' show religions with them, out of curiosity. Well, that way I get to learn much more about it. I don't really join in any of the singing with them, but I can sort of join somehow and participate and observe. As long as it's just observing, I don't have to really join in. I watch and I listen to some of the visitors' religious shows. Only a few of them were, of course. I've learned from some of them, but I couldn't understand a lot of what it was about, if I'm honest. I feel perhaps, well, only God and the angels, like I said, really watching us. And if the old man's right, or old Theo, perhaps the aliens too. But I don't know about that. Aliens? Oh, is that what he believes in then? Yes, said the mother after some thought. I think there is, because he goes on about them so much. If that wasn't bad enough, having a son getting indoctrinated into some animal religion, now I've got this old elder grandfather, who's getting into these weird alien religions. But like I say, they don't push it onto you. They just talk about it if you invite them to. So don't if you don't want to know about it. But really, they don't push it on anyone. But I'm getting stuck between these weird beliefs that they just want to talk about all the time. Otherwise, they might sit there solemnly, just waiting for me to ask. Well, he claims it's part of his cross-cultural studies. The older man, his alien religions. Says it's for some writing he's doing, some novelling or something. went on the mother, now watching the clouds out of the window drifting slowly by across the clear blue sky that they'd both been looking out of. Don't worry about neither of them, though they wouldn't mention it outside of the rooms, too embarrassed to, probably, not out of their specialist interest groups, nor they'd ever mention it outside the alien group or the animal group with my son, young Kit Stew, said the mother. So they wouldn't be over talking you about it, or outsiders, she said, to try and reassure her. If the alien theories do get too much, with the elder father, the visitor, he's never a problem. You never see him that much, as I said. He's often very human outside. And if you really need him to be more human, you could just encourage him to be. Just talk to him more, ask questions. Not that you're here to look after him or anything. I said that. You don't have to. He does look after himself. But, he looks after himself as much as he can. My eldest son and I and a few others help out with the medication preparations for him. Just adapting some of his newer medications to the newer houses for him, said the mother, now finishing her introductions of all the other 3 adults, the ones that Lucy would be more likely to meet if she was living in the house with them. Then, after showing her also her own bedroom, the mother's show bedroom, full of the dancing memorabilia, with the long walk-in wardrobes, several of them, with plenty of room to stride about and do a lovely twirl. And she even showed several of the long dance costumes, the thousands of sequined in, and all the glittery, colourful, different curtains that she had in there, as well as the dozens of scarves that she then showed off. There were loads of pictures hanging on the wall of former dance partners, crammed full. And then she briefly showed, without naming them, showing her room, and it was just an ordinary room, noting that there was nothing strange or exceptional about it, except of course for the sheer amount of different costumes and the dancing paraphernalia. She opened several drawers of shoes, and all the accessories as well, just seemed to be all over the place. And there was a corner boudoir as well, a little corner mirror that had lights around it, with dozens of makeup bags, an astonishing amount, thought Lucy, with a large mirror lit up behind. I do some talk shows from here occasionally, said the mother, showing her out of the room quickly, not spending too long inside there. Back to the corridor they went to. That's where I'll be if you call me and I'm at rest, said the mother, just so that she could imagine where she was then. And finally, now that she could begin showing the children's rooms, the ones that Lucy would actually visit if she started as a child-minding nanny, if she decided to take on the job. Poor Lucy was getting a bit tired, mentally and physically, from the sheer amount of information she'd been given, not so much though from this small meandering walk that they'd gone through, and felt that it was really a lot to take in. She wouldn't judge them all so far, and she wouldn't decide yet, not based on the few rambled stories she'd heard so far. She'd consider it all later, she'd decided, and think it over, take her time before deciding whether to take it on or not, and to know what it really was. Would watch some of their shows as agreed to with the mother, and then they would see the video of her being shown around the house. Well, there wasn't much to it, she could remember that. Although she'd not really said that much either, just been asking lots of questions, because it was all new to her still. Had hardly had a chance, she felt, to ask that much yet herself. Perhaps would do all that later, during the interview. Yet she had tried to listen as much as possible, and to absorb it all, and to ask whatever relevant questions on things that she wasn't sure about, and to follow the mother's reasoning as much as possible. After viewing each of the children's empty rooms, that were empty of people, although they were still full of their clothes, toys, study tools, and the empty beds, and various other objects and instruments that they played with and used in their studies, Lucy was then led into the interview room, back to the listening talking room again, where they sat down, proceeding to relax, and then the mother encouraged her to have another drink with her. And she did, and she agreed to, glad of it, being a little dehydrated. At last, she began asking some of her own questions. And then the mother began asking of Lucy's past childminding. And she told her about caring for her younger brother and a sister in her early age, and that she was an older child herself and began caring for the younger siblings at a young age. After that, she'd helped out with a few friends who had younger children themselves and who were out working longer hours and needed someone they knew well and trusted and that had worked with younger children before. She worked for them, did some light shopping, cooking, cleaning, washing, and counselling, and she talked and played with them and did some little study exercises too with them. She'd also done a course in teaching reading and writing, in grammar exercises also, that she'd in later years done as study exercising with the children that she was childminding. She'd gone on to do a course and had relevant qualifications in childminding at several colleges, and had later returned after doing some other work to professional care for parents who needed more support in caring for their younger children. She'd been a live-in nanny for a couple of years, well, for many years, and she'd also later, in the last few years, also visited a number of family homes through a care agency. With the care agency, she provided care to a number of different children with a number of different needs that Lucy explained, and had never before, as she'd stated earlier, ever been in any kind of show family or show care. No, she'd never done that at all, never worked for a show care agency. It was just a home care agency, a simple one, without any cameras or any of that razzmatazz. As she'd been told earlier on, she told the mother caring wasn't something to show off. She'd never really felt the need to do that. Neither had any of the clients or the parents whose children she was caring for ever required her to use a camera or to be recorded while looking after the children. It was just never something that had been desired or required by those parents or the home care agencies employing her. Though she did nod along and say that she was happy enough to be filmed, that she claimed wasn't really a concern of hers, not in any way, no. Lucy had denied she was hiding her care. No, it wasn't about that. It was just something not necessary to be filmed in the previous care jobs. She said that it was just something that she'd never gone into. She had heard of show home care, but had never really thought about doing that. And looking at the mother's advertisement, she just hadn't understood that that's what it was. She'd said she didn't answer the mother's advertisement knowingly. Some of the care shows could put you off caring as much as turn you on. They could repel you as much as attract you. So there were lots of different types of care shows, explained the mother, saying that it wasn't just one type of care show. There were the good care shows, the bad care shows, and the average care shows, and everything in between. It was really no different than ordinary home care and ordinary caring, but just with cameras present, really. And most of the care shows were just used for the participants themselves, for the home care agencies, for parents, and for friends and family, relatives of those being cared for. It could be used for them also, assured the mother, wanting now to explain some of her more reasoning for having the filming in the care shows. Thinking over the mother's response, Lucy had said that she did appreciate the openness, and perhaps her need, or some people's specific needs for it sometimes. Yet she just didn't feel that it was necessary to always have to share so much. And she said that she was worried about joining the show because of that. Not because of her, or the family, or anything she'd heard about them, who all seemed fun and interesting and nice enough, and seemed very hard-working. She just wasn't sure that making a show out of the caring was really the right thing for her type of grammar caring. She really wasn't sure that the type of study caring that she was giving was really that necessary for showing. The mother echoed her own earlier thoughts. We make lives out of our shows. That's what we do here. You know, we make studying out of the shows, and we make caring out of the shows too. But it doesn't mean that you have to adapt your caring that much or even change it that specifically. You don't have to know yourself too much about all the technological needs. the older children will look after all that themselves. So you don't have to be specifically technologically trained to work it. It's just knowing that it will be filmed and watching back some of the reviews. That's all, really. Watching back some of your previous episodes just to review how things went in some of the study shows. That's really the main purpose of how it would be used with you. Explain now the mother. Going on to say that Lucy was from a no-showing world, and of course it was new to her, who didn't know how or why or what ways the show world would work, especially the care show world, if they had no experience in it. So how could she know how such a care show life would ever work unless she tried it and gave it a chance? Then she might perhaps know, and she encouraged her to perhaps consider trying it first, and even said she could do it in a trial family show. It could be a trial care show if that's what she wanted, saying she could always leave the family care show if it really didn't work out, could leave at any time. If it didn't work out, then that was absolutely fine. She could leave after hours or days or weeks or whenever if she really felt it was too much. Then having the cameras there, if that did become an issue, and it hadn't with many of the childminders, the mother attempted to reassure her. But if it did become an issue at any point, she could leave at any time, of course, the mother reassured her. If it didn't work out and she felt it was too strange or some weird cult, then fine, she could always leave, and the door wouldn't lock shut. The moment that she said yes, no, she was always free to leave. She could choose to leave the show any time she liked to. Of course she could. Any time she wanted to leave, she was free to. But how would she ever know what it was like? Pleaded the show mum, unless she tried it first and saw exactly what it was, how they used it, and experienced it. It was only through experiencing the show that you actually knew what the show was. Unless you'd experienced the care show, you know little to nothing, only from an outsider's perspective, what the care show experience really was, claimed the mother. And Lucy thought it over, saying it was something she thought maybe she could consider doing, but obviously wanted more time. Perhaps she was just trying to buy more time alone to think about it more carefully. She really liked a lot of the stories that she'd been told about the children, especially the older children, and some of the older grandparents too, that had been adopted into the family. She liked a lot of the stories about the mother and also the wider family that she'd been introduced to, and those she'd cared for too. She thought they sounded interesting, and that she would potentially be interested to find out more about it. But what still wanted more time to think it over. I'm here for the children. It's not for the show, Lucy finally had said, though, after thinking it over and reading through the contract with all the conditions that were written down on there, explaining the terms about what the job would involve. But the show is for the children too, answered the mother. That's why I'm for the show, because this is the family show. It's a family care show. Well, it is the one you're involved with. So when I say I think you're just right for the show, that's a compliment, because I make the family show for the children themselves, said the mother. Maybe you could watch some of the children's shows, suggested the mother. Just get to see them, get to see what they're about first, what they do with the other childminders too, in the show plays and the study shows too, said the show mum expectantly, now getting out some of the projectors with little box images, expecting to put them on. All right, said Lucy, nodding along. If it's not too long, then of course. Yes, said the mother. It's just some of the highlights that I can show you, just of the recent few months, and the last year. The last year, said Lucy. Well, it will just be a few of the highlights, just to give you a taster of the kind of studies that they do together. The kind of caring that you'd be expected to give to them. Then you'll get a chance to know more about what it involves, said the mother, now loading into the projector one of the videos to watch. I was expecting to see them with you, to be honest, said Lucy. No, I have to tell you and show you first. It's easier that way than explaining, and then you'll actually see and hear what's going on, so you can really know more about actually what it all involves, said the mother. I'll watch the shows, but I don't really think I can know them properly, not until I've talked to them, said Lucy. Oh, of course, you'll know them more fully from meeting them in person. Absolutely, later on you will do, if you still want to. Just look at the show first and then decide. You'll get to see some of their previous study shows and see what the previous show cares were about, with the other show carers, had said the mother, now loading on one of the show films in the projector. And so there was the film of Lucy then watching other children's shows with the other visiting governesses, the other childminders who were with the children, and they saw them both on the children's films. And Lucy was there asking questions about what they were doing, why they were doing it, and then the mother was trying to answer her, giving a commentary as she went along with it. Ah, well, that's then when they all went to the woodland school last summer, commented the mother, on seeing some of the girls out in a field, and they were dressed in a meadow dance. There's Hyacinth, that's the eldest, Rose, Jasmine, young Lily there, Daisy, Violet, watch out for her, Dahlia, Heather, oh, Hazel, she said with another one stepping into screen. Then there's Amaryllis, oh, and Asta. He's a flower boy. All the rest of them were girls, though. Well, that's their names at the meadow dance, explained the mother. That's what they call each other when they're out in the field. But they don't call themselves at home, and they wouldn't call them that at home either. It might embarrass them, said the mother. They only really call themselves that when they're out in the field shows. They go to these playing fields for the field shows, so you'll do some of the shows out there. Oh, some study shows as well as playing fields, said the mother, now rethinking. I wish I'd brought a pen to write it all down. There's so much to remember, said Lucy. Oh, don't have to, because I'll send you all the e-notes later, said the mother. Oh, and there's young Stu that I mentioned. I mentioned Kit Stew, the older son, pointed out the mother. It'll be nice to see him in person. Maybe if he's around later. I shouldn't bother him right now, though, because he's busy with his studies, of course. And then there's the elderly man. Well, enough about him. It would be nice if someone could draw pictures of them, said the mother, with now some video footage of them being shown. So she gave a little talk about them too. I was just going to write a long list of all the names down so that I know what to call them, to be honest, said Lucy. Well, don't call them their flower names, whatever you do. Not when they're in the house show. They're only for the field shows. No, they've got different names. Away from the meadow shows, they'd hate to be called their flower names, so I wouldn't do that anyway. I told you, because if they do visit the field shows, when they visit there a lot, to meet their friends there, at the woodland school, well, they don't like to use their school names when they're out of school, said the mother. Well, why is that? Asked Lucy. They seem like they're lovely names. For girls, I mean. Well, a few of them, they just don't like it. They don't mind on their own. It's okay. But when they're all together as a group, they don't like to be known as the flower girls. I don't know why. It's just something they don't like. Too worried about what other older girls might think. Worried about being laughed at, perhaps, said the mother, looking away now, a little sad. Or maybe about the older directors. They don't want to end up in the wrong film of Flower Girls or something. I don't know. But they have got their names at house for the house show. Of course you'll get told all those. I'll send you those in the e-lists. And they'll tell you themselves at the introductions, reaffirmed the mother. Oh, I see. Flower Power Girls, popular in the woodland school, but not so much outside, said Lucy. Well, they're fragile flowers out of the woodland school, that's all, unless they all keep together, said the mother now. And never show their flowering side. Not really. Not when they're away from nature, out of the field shows. They're very different, and they have different names, therefore. Well, they've even got different names when they're out of the city. Away from the city names, explained the mother, going on. Oh, and here are the boys, said the mother. Now the projected image on the small interview room walls had suddenly changed, and new images flashed on the screen, and Lucy turned back to those. Here are the boys, said the mother, turning to those projected images, returning to the show of the recent family trip to a local park, with a grove of the trees, with the lads all huddled around it, stood nearby, all stood tall and proudly, stood nearby each other, a clutch of them. From the left, began the mother, zooming in on the images closer with the projector and screening in larger so that Lucy could see. From the left, there's Rowan, and then that one's Ash, and then Oki stood next to him. Willow's just a bit more to the side. Holly is further back. Laurel behind him. Olive and Lyndon, they're just off to the side. Maple in front. And that one... Oh, no, that's it, said the mother. Now turning back to Lucy. The Aranya, well, that's the forest teacher. There are lots of Aranya in that area. The forest teachers, they're the ones all around them, surrounding them. They're the ones in the background, said the mother. And Lucy looked back to the image of the children, and stood behind was a huddle of various aged adults that were all in a cluster behind them. The woodland teachers, presumably, as the mother would call them, the Aranya. There's a lot of them, said Lucy. Gosh, so many. They were all adopted in, I guess, she said after reading all the notes about it, feeling that perhaps she should have asked some more about this earlier. Well, those are the ones stood around that just go to the forest school together, yes. And those are some of the forest friends that they met there too. And the Aranya, the older men, stood at the back. And the women too, a few of them. They're the forest teachers. So obviously they're not ones. They won't be here, said the mother now with a smile. Of course, said Lucy, nodding with a smile too. Don't worry, I'm not expecting you to run a whole forestry school or anything like that, said the mother. Just a small class, occasionally. They go out to the field for study trips there. Just a few study shows, and at the end of it all, there'll be a play show perhaps too, for some of them. Some of the older ones won't want to do that, though, said the mother. If you decide to stay on, then you can go to the forestry school too, as well. You'll get to meet some of the forestry teachers there as well, said the mother. Oh, I see, said Lucy. So there are field trips with it. Yes, said the mother, going on to explain what some of the forest shows were about, and some of the other field shows that involved various study shows, but that were outside of the house. Maybe I could find my own flower name then, said Lucy. Yes, or maybe a tree name. Whatever you find suitable for you, said the mother. You'll have to work with some of the woodland teachers to find it, perhaps, said the mother. And did you have one yourself? When you went with the children? Asked Lucy. Oh, back in the show field? The mother looked like she was thinking, a long time ago. Well, they used to call me Maple, years ago. Long time ago, though. Oh, I've not been in show fields for a very long time now. Haven't been Miss Maple for a very long time, sighed the mother, looking now out the window, almost nostalgically. Oh, to be honest, I do miss going out there. I miss being out in the field show with them. It's a very long time ago, really. No, I was Miss Maple back then. Haven't been for a long time. Sometimes I'm glad we have to go out and move on much more, though. I just don't get a chance to go out anymore, really. I've not given up the merry maypole. No, not to become Kerry Dancer. But I don't have the chance to go up there and do it anymore, really, she said to Lucy, who was a little puzzled by the explanation of it. Not sure, really, if she had to give it up somehow, but not really wanting to ask a personal question too much yet. Oh, if I'd not had to become Kerry Dancer, who knows, said the mother after some silence. Maybe I'd still be up there, doing the merry maypole dance with them. I don't know, said the mother, trailing off. And Lucy still wasn't sure what to ask. She was still a little puzzled how it was that they had so many different names when they were in different places, telling the mother that it was a little confusing, that they should change their names and their titles when they were in the different places. Thinking about it, the mother had said she didn't find it that confusing at all. She said she'd find it much more confusing if they only had one name for each person, and if they never changed their names at all. Because surely people were always changing how they were, changing their moods and abilities, and changing how their mindsets were, according to the circumstances and the abilities of the places they happened to be in. Surely their names must change too, if they did, reasoned the mother. It would be madness and too confusing to insist that people always keep the same names, even when they change places, and their abilities, their moods, and their whole behaviour dramatically changes in some places. Why not change the name to suit those changes? The mother had reasoned back to her. Lucy had shrugged, unsure about this. To insist on people to keep changing their names when they were no longer relevant seemed a strange thing to do, claimed the mother. She said it would be madness and too confusing to insist on people keep changing the names if it was no longer relevant. Wouldn't people just get trapped with out-of-date names, though, past their usefulness? How can names remain the same when people are always changing? Seasons are changing, everything changes, said the mother now, going on. So the names must change too. We don't stay the same, do we? Something about us must change. And to recognise the change, we should change the name too, surely, reasoned out the mother, going on, as if it was all too obvious to her and she was having to teach a child or some foreigner that looked at things very differently from her. Lucy thought it all over and said yes, people did change, it's true, yet something about them really stayed the same, their essence, something remained, she felt. And people didn't really change that much in most of the places that they visited, only occasionally, surely. And surely it made sense to keep the same name most of the time when they visited most places, if they really didn't change that much. She went on to say many of the names given in her world were just fixed names. You kept the same names. They were special names to one person because they said something special about that person, wherever, whoever, however they were. They still remained, their essence remained. And that's what Lucy's belief remains still. They were gifts that were special. Those names were special gifts from their mothers or fathers or parents too, or even their ancestors that they'd inherited the names from. So those names had special meaning to the people, wherever they were, whatever place or time or people they were meeting. Lucy had carefully explained, saying that was the reason she and many others liked to keep the same names, whatever place or person they were meeting, whenever or however they were. The mother had said, it didn't sound like a gift if you weren't allowed to exchange it for other gifts when you outgrow it, if it became obsolete and old-fashioned or out of date after some time, or if you went to a special place, then you might need to adopt a whole special name. And there was a whole world of special names that could be chosen especially for that special time and special place that you showed in, said the mother, saying that yes, she too and the others had names that they kept the same, but also other special names, for if they did have special occasions, special places that they'd visit, or special groups of friends that they'd visit too. Lucy had said, yes, she understood people adapting their original names, or adopting a few occasional names, for special occasions perhaps, like other nicknames that you might use around a few special friends, perhaps. Yes, she could understand that much. Yet she feared if people were allowed to just swap names too often or too much for any old occasion and abandon so many past names for conveyor belts of newer names, surely it would make remembering all of the newer names so much harder. There'd be ever-growing longer lists to remember. How could anyone be expected to remember so many new names that would change so regularly? To know that it will be so much harder, surely, and that you would need a continuity of some original names kept on. What if the original name, the mother asked, after Lucy had questioned her, what if that original name was given to you as a mistake, though? What if it was all a mistake? Asked the mother, shrugging her shoulders. Or what if the meanings of the word, of the name you were given, changed over time? So that although you were given a certain name, the meaning of that name changed over the years or decades. Even if you hadn't changed, your name's meaning may have changed much and greatly, said the mother, saying that sometimes they had to change the names because the meaning of the word names had already long ago changed to something that was inappropriate. The mother had said that that's something that did occasionally happen, saying that a name could change to something really rude that had previously been something very serious. If times changed, a meaningful name could suddenly become obsolete and meaningless. So surely you did have to regularly check up on people's names to make sure that they were relevant to the situation, to the people they were living with, to the places they were living at too, to make sure that those names were understood and meaningful and actually relevant to the specific people and place, the mother had said. Now looking back at Lucy, examining her, saying, surely people didn't live with the same old names all their lives. Those names could have changed so much, or could have multiple new meanings that were so different from the earlier original meanings, that could even have opposite meanings than the original ones, or a whole variety of multiple different contradictory meanings. That would be far more confusing, surely, than just choosing a more specific, special name that was unique to your special, unique situation, said the mother, saying that all the other children and her had all chosen their special, specific, unique names that were special and as specific as they were themselves, but that they only really shared with their very close confidants and their close friends and family, and that it really wasn't for the public shows or for the public until they got to know them much better. And that's the way the mother had explained the variety of names that Lucy would encounter with all of the show children, but also the show family as well.